Yeah, guys, in the last session, we completed our discussion related to Spring Boot concepts. And we summarized what we have learnt in the Spring Boot and what we have learnt in the Spring Framework and what are the annotations that we have learnt in the Spring Framework. Now, today we are going to start our discussion related to Spring Data JPA. Right. Fine. So let's understand what is this Spring Data JPA and what we can do by using this Spring Data JPA. The first thing is Spring Data JPA is one module in the Spring Framework. Is one module in Spring Framework. It is used to develop persistence layer. By using the Spring Data JPA, we can develop persistence layer in our application. What is the meaning of persistence layer? That is database communication logic. So there are several technologies and frameworks are available to develop persistence layer. We have normal Java JDBC. We are having normal Java JDBC to develop persistence layer, and we are having Spring JDBC to develop persistence layer, and we are having Hibernate framework, a Hibernate framework available to develop persistence layer, and we are having Spring ORM also to develop persistence layer. On top of all these things, now the current trend in the market, that is Spring Data JPA. So Spring Data JPA is one part, or I can say one module in the Spring Framework. By using this Spring Data JPA, we can develop persistence layer in our project. Persistence layer nothing but the layer which contains the classes or interfaces to communicate with the database, that is called persistence layer. To simplify this persistence layer development, we are going to use this Data JPA. Now, sir, already Java JDBC available, Spring JDBC available, Hibernate available, ORM available, Spring Data JPA, why it came into picture? Now, if you see, Spring Data JPA is simplifying CRUD operations implementation. So when you want to perform CRUD operations with the database table, like inserting the record, updating the record, deleting the record, this Spring Data JPA is simplifying CRUD operations implementation in the project. Now, for example, if you take one table with a name called user master, there is one database table user master. For user master table, we will create one user master Dove class. In the user master Dove class, creating a record, inserting the record, updating, retrieving, deleting. 4 operations are common. Insert the record, update the record, delete the record, and retrieve the record. So here if you observe, here in this class, I need to write 4 methods. Assume that there is a database table with a name called user master. So user master table related operations we will develop in the user master DAO class. In that class, I am writing 4 methods. What is the purpose of 4 methods? Insert the record, update the record, delete the record, and select the record. These are 4 common methods for the every table that we are going to perform. Now, similarly, there is another table in the project which is role master. In my project, there is another table called role master. To perform operations with the role master, I'm going to create a class with a name called role master DAO. In the role master DAO, again I need to write the 4 methods. What is the purpose of the 4 methods? Insert the record, update the record, delete the record, retrieve the record. For 2 tables, how many classes I'm creating? 2 classes I'm creating. How many methods I'm writing? In every class I'm writing 4 methods. For example, there is another table with a name called user details. There is another table called user details, or assume that there is another table called product details in my project. Product details table is available. For product details table, again I will create one more class with a name called product details DAO class. In this product details DAO class, again I need to write the 4 methods to perform CRUD operations. Now 3 tables are there. So 3 DAO classes I have created. 3 into 4, 12 methods I am writing. So the methods are having same logic, or the logic is different for every class? Same logic. Insert the record, update the record, delete the record, retrieve the record. Are you getting my point? So if I have just 3 tables in the project, I'm writing 12 methods to perform database operations. Are you getting? Suppose, for example, there is another table available. Admin details table is available. Who are the admins in my project? For them, I am creating one table. Or else, assume that there is another table called payment details table available. Who purchased the product? The payment details will be stored to payment details table. For this, again, I need to create one more class with the name called payment details DAO class. Now here again, what I need to do? Again, I need to write the 4 methods here. Insert, update, delete, retrieve. Like this. Now assume that in my project there are 1000 tables available. In my project there are 1000 tables available. Then what I need to do? 1000 multiplied by 4 is equal to 4000 methods I have to create. What is the purpose of these 4000 methods? Create, insert the record, update the record, delete the record, and retrieve the record. Is there anything other than that? No. Suppose, for example, my project is a very big banking application. In my project, there are 5000 tables are available. For 5000 tables, I will create 5000 DAO classes. As per industry standard, every database table should contain its own DAO. One table, one DAO will be available. In that DAO, methods will be available to perform CRUD operations in only that table. So user master table, to perform DB operations on the user master table, user master DAO. In that DAO, I'm writing 4 methods to insert the record, update the record, delete the record, and retrieve the record. Similarly, I have here one more table in the project, role master table. Project roles will be available. To perform operations in this table, I'm creating role master DAO class. In that class, again, I'm writing 4 methods: insert, update, delete, retrieve. And I have third table, product details. To perform operations on the product details table, we have product details DAO. In that class, again, I am writing 4 methods to perform same operations. I have payment details. To perform operations, payment details DAO. Again, 4 methods to perform insert, update, delete, retrieve. Like this, I am having 5000 tables in my project. 5000 tables means 5000 DAO classes. Every table will contain one DAO class. For 5000 tables, 5000 DAOs should be created. In every DAO, 4 methods we have to write to perform operations. 5000 into 4. 20,000. What we are doing in these 20,000 methods? Can I say it is a boilerplate code? Yes, it is the boilerplate code. We should write same methods in every class to perform. This is the problem. If you go for Java JDBC, Spring JDBC, Hibernate, or Spring ORM, you need to write these 20,000 methods in the project to perform CRUD operations. To overcome this problem, Spring Data JPA came into picture. If I use Spring Data JPA in my project, I need to write 0 methods. I no need to write single method also to perform the CRUD operations, because that data JPA providing predefined methods to perform the CRUD operation. Without writing single method, I can perform CRUD operation in all the 5000 database tables. Are you guys able to follow me? What is a Spring Data JPA? Why we are going for Spring Data JPA? Spring Data JPA is one module in the Spring framework. What is the purpose of the Spring Data JPA? It is used to develop persistence layer. What is the persistence layer? The logic which is responsible to communicate with the database, that is called persistence layer. As a Java programmer, in how many ways we can develop persistence layer? 5 ways available. What are those? Java JDBC, Spring JDBC, Hibernate Framework, Spring ORM, Spring Data JPA. If I go for any one of these out of first 4, what is the problem? Boilerplate code. In every class, in every DAO class, we need to write some common methods. Insert, update, delete, retrieve. These methods are common for every class. To overcome this problem, what we are going now? We are going for Spring Data JPA. By using Spring Data JPA, easily we can perform the CRUD operations without writing single method. If you want to perform insert, update, retrieve, you delete, insert, update, delete, retrieve. To perform the CRUD operations, to perform these 4 CRUD operations in the table, you no need to write single method also. Sir, then without writing the code, how my operation will happen? Data JPA provided some predefined methods. You just call that method, it will take care of the logic. You no need to write the logic. You just need to call the logic which is already available in the data JPA. Now see here, the above 20,000 methods, above, if we have 5,000 tables, if we have 5,000 DB tables, then we have to create 5,000 DAO classes. Every DAO class should contain 4 common methods. 4 common methods. So it will become 20,000 methods with the same logic. 20,000 methods with the same logic. This is not recommended. Writing same methods again and again is not recommended. That concept is called boilerplate code. To avoid boilerplate code in the DAO classes, we are going for data JPA. What is the main purpose of going for data JPA? To avoid boilerplate code in DAO classes, we can use Spring Data JPA. Spring Data JPA is developed on top of Spring ORM, on top of Hibernate framework. We are going to use the Spring Data JPA. Spring Data JPA internally will use Hibernate framework only. It is a ORM concept. Already you guys are attending the Hibernate classes. What is entity? What is mapping? How the record will be inserted, updated, deleted, retrieved, transaction. You are doing some operations in the Hibernate. But whatever the logic you are writing in the DAO class by using Hibernate, do I need to write that logic now? Who will take care of that logic? That logic will be taken care by data JPA. To avoid boilerplate code in DAO classes, we can use Spring Data JPA. Spring Data JPA will use Hibernate framework internally. We will develop our DAO layer by using data JPA. Data JPA will use Hibernate framework internally to execute database operations. Hibernate will use JDBC. JDBC will communicate with the database. Actually, without JDBC, we can't communicate with the database from a Java program. So here assume that this is my database. I want to develop a Java application to communicate with the database. It's mandatory that JDBC is required to communicate with the database. Our Java application can communicate with the JDBC and JDBC can communicate with the database. Able to follow me? But If my Java application communicate with the JDBC, lot of code we need to write to perform the database operations. To overcome this problem, Hibernate came into picture. To overcome this problem, Hibernate came into picture. Hibernate ORM. Instead of we are communicating with the JDBC directly, we will communicate with Hibernate. Then what this Hibernate will do? Internally, Hibernate will communicate with the JDBC. JDBC will communicate with the database. Now, if you go for a Hibernate also, some logic we have to write. Create the persistence entity, create the entity manager, begin the session factory, transaction, commit, lot of code we should write programmatically. To avoid this boilerplate code, Spring Data JPA came into picture. Now, Spring Data JPA is available. We will use Spring Data JPA to develop persistence layer. Spring Data JPA internally communicate with the Hibernate framework. Hibernate will communicate with the JDBC. JDBC communicating with the database. Now what our application will do? Our application is going to Java application. Our Java application will communicate with the data JPA. Now we are going to develop the Java application. Our Java application will communicate with the data JPA. Data JPA will communicate with the Hibernate. Hibernate will communicate with the JDBC. JDBC will communicate with the database. Earlier, we developed Java application. That Java application also can communicate with the Hibernate directly. My Java application can communicate with the JDBC also. But which one is recommended? No, it depends upon the situation. If you want super fast performance, then going with the JDBC is recommended. If a performance is very crucial for your application, then you need to write a plain JDBC, because JDBC will directly execute your query in the database. Query execution will be faster when you go for JDBC. Now in the Hibernate, your application can communicate with the Hibernate. In the Hibernate, you will write a HQL query or a JPQL query. That JPQL query is a database independent query. So that the JPQL query should be converted to SQL query. That SQL query should execute with the database. Every query should be converted. Every JPQL query should be converted to SQL query. Performance will be decreased. So performance wise, JDBC is better. Luxury wise, Hibernate and data JPA is better. If you go for Hibernate or data JPA, you can represent the data in the form of object. Save method, you give the object, record will be inserted. Retrieve method, record will be retrieved in the form of object. You can represent data in the form of objects if you go for ORM framework. If you are using ORM, you need to compromise on the performance, because ORM framework cannot communicate with the database directly. ORM framework should convert everything into SQL, and that SQL will be given to JDBC, that JDBC has to execute. If performance is crucial for your application, then going with a Java application with JDBC, that will give you better performance. If performance is not important, I want everything in the object format, I want my application to be loosely coupled with the database, then either you can go for a Hibernate framework or you can go for data JPA. In the Hibernate and data JPA, which one is easy? Data JPA. Why data JPA is required? Data JPA will use Hibernate framework internally. You no need to write any code here. Data JPA is going to take care of your persistence logic execution. Your application will communicate with the data JPA. Data JPA will communicate with the Hibernate framework internally. Hibernate framework will communicate with the JDBC. JDBC will communicate with the database. Are you guys clear? In the project, we are going to develop microservices. Some microservices will use plain JDBC because performance is important for them. Even in my project, Some of our microservices are using Spring Data JPA. Some microservices are using plain JDBC. Why we are going for plain JDBC? Performance will be faster. Got it? Now, in these classes, we are going to see how Java application will communicate with the data JPA. By using data JPA, how can we perform database operations? Are you guys able to follow me? Good. Now, Spring Data JPA will use Hibernate framework internally. Spring Data JPA repositories. There is a concept called Spring Data JPA repositories. To simplify our persistence layer development, Data JPA provided a concept called repository concept. From now onwards, we are not going to call it as a DAO classes. Now we are going to call as repository. Repository is, sir, we discussed about Git repository. Is that repository, this repository same? What is a Git repository? It is used to store project source code. Data JPA repository is responsible to communicate with the database. Getting my point? GitHub repository is different. Nexus repository is different. Our JPA repository is different. JPA, Data JPA provided repository interfaces to simplify CRUD operations in the project. Are you getting my point? Whatever the boilerplate code that programmers are writing in the Hibernate or JDBC, that boilerplate code we no need to write. If you go for Spring Data JPA, sir, then how my record will be inserted, how my record will be updated, will be taken care by JPA repositories. To simplify persistence layer, development, Data JPA provided repository interfaces. To simplify persistence layer development, Data JPA provided repository interfaces. Mainly, there are two repositories are available. One is called CRUD repository and the second one is called as JPA repository. One is called CRUD repository, second one is called as JPA repository. Sir, now, what is the difference between CRUD repository and JPA repository? So here, JPA repository is providing more functionalities when compared with the CRUD repository. In the CRUD repository, we have methods to perform CRUD operations. In the JPA repository, whatever you have in the CRUD repository, same thing is providing by JPA, and some additional benefits also will be available in the JPA. So now here, CRUD operation methods will be available. CRUD operations methods will be available in the CRUD repository. Now here, if you go for JPA, CRUD operation methods plus sorting methods will be available, plus pagination methods will be available, plus QBE methods will be available. Query by example. So now, which one is recommended? Which one is recommended to use in the project now? If you want to perform just CRUD operations, insert the record, update the record, delete and retrieve, then you need to go for CRUD repository. Sir, along with this, I want to perform some sorting. I want to perform some pagination. I want to perform query by example concept. Then we need to go for JPA repository. I have 100 records. I want to sort the records in the ascending order. I want to sort the records in the descending order. Name wise sorting, age wise sorting, salary wise sorting, price wise sorting. Products are there in the Flipkart. So in the Flipkart, mobiles are available. I want to sort the mobiles price low to high. So lowest price mobile should come first. Highest mobile should go to the last, or else reverse. I want to sort the mobiles highest to lowest price. That is called sorting. In the JPA repository, we have some methods to perform sorting. And the next one, pagination is available. Sir, what is pagination? So here, several times you are using Google. For example, I will go for what is Springboot. I'm typing what is Springboot. Google, see here, how many results available in the Google? Crores of records are available, right? Crores of records are available in the Google when you type what is Springboot. So do you think that Google will retrieve all 4 crores or 4 billion records from the database to display for the user? Do you think that anybody will go to Google second page? Do you think that anybody will go for Google second page? No. So first 10 records only Google will display. So, but actually crores of records available in the Google database regarding what is the Springboot. My query is what is the Springboot? When I search what is Springboot, there are crores of records available in the Google. So is Google retrieving all the records and displaying in the browser? No. Google is retrieving only first 10 records and displaying. If you are not satisfied with the first 10 records, then you will go to second page in the Google. When you click on 2, next to 10 records, it is going to retrieve page 2. Okay, if you are not satisfied, then you will click on 3. Next to third page records, it is going to retrieve. That is called pagination. Retrieving the records based on the page number. Retrieving the records based on the page number is called as pagination. If we retrieve all the 4 crore records once at a time, what is the problem? 4 crore records we need to hold in the Java object. JVM memory will be completed. Project will run into out of memory problem. So if I retrieve, select star from table, 4 crore records are coming. That means for every record will be represented as one object, one entity object. So if I have 3 employees, 3 employee objects will come as a collection. Now here 4 crore records are available. 4 crore objects will be created in the JVM. Our JVM will die. Are you guys getting my point? So do you think that in the project we are going to retrieve all the records from the table at a time? If you retrieve all the records from the table at a time, your JVM memory will not be sufficient to hold those many objects. To avoid that problem, we are going for pagination. Pagination nothing but retrieve the records based on the page number. Suppose if I type it, now which page it is displaying currently? First page. That means only first page record is coming. If you are not satisfied with that, then you will click on 2. When you click on 2, then what is happening? Second page records are coming. Out of 100 people, not even 5% people will go for Google second page. So in the world, how many people are using Google? Not even 5% people will go for Google second page. Everybody will choose any one link in the first page only. So 10 records are sufficient. Why we need to retrieve 4 crore records available in the table? Performance wise, it is not at all recommended. To avoid that problem, in the project we are going to implement a concept called pagination. Are you able to follow me? What is the sorting and what is the pagination? Sorting means retrieving the records in the ascending order or in the descending order. What is the meaning of pagination? Right? Retrieve the records based on the page number. We should not retrieve all the, suppose if table is having less than 100 records, then it is okay. Retrieving 100 records does not cost on the memory. But retrieving 1 lakh records, retrieving 1 crore records will affect on the JVM's memory. So that's why in the real time, we will never execute select star from table name. If you execute select star from table name, your JVM will blast. Because crores of records will be available in the database, JVM will not have that much memory to hold all the objects. Are you guys clear? Now, to implement such kind of a pagination, we have the methods in the JPA repository. If you go for CRUD repository, pagination method will not be available. If you go for JPA repository, sorting methods will be available. Pagination methods also will be available. And the next one, QBE. QBE stands for query by example. Query by example. This is best suitable when you want to implement some search criteria in the project. I'm going for Flipkart. In the Flipkart, I want to check for mobiles. Now, let me click on mobile phones. Now, some mobile options are coming for me in the Flipkart. Electronics, Realme. Some mobiles are available. Clear that. How many mobiles are coming now? 7,793 products are coming. Do you think that Flipkart is retrieving all the mobiles? How many mobiles they are retrieving? Can I say it is a pagination? Now, in the Flipkart database, there are 7,793 mobiles are available, but Flipkart is displaying only first 24 mobiles here. It is displaying only first 24 mobiles. After that, if you are not satisfied, then what you need to do? You click on number 2. When you click on number 2, another 24 mobiles they are retrieving. Google will retrieve only first 10 records. Flipkart is retrieving only first 24 records. If you are not satisfied with that, then go for the next page. So pagination is available or not available? Pagination is available. Let me go for gmail.com. Let me go for gmail.com. Some Gmail ID. I don't have any passwords. Yeah, simple, fine. When you go for Gmail, in the inbox, how many mails will display? Have you ever observed? Only a few number. When you open Gmail, in the inbox, assume that there are 5,000 emails available in the inbox. Do you think that it will display all the 5,000 emails in the inbox? 50. By default, Gmail will display first 50 emails only. If you want to see the remaining emails, you need to go to the next page. So in the Gmail, pagination is available. In the Gmail, pagination is available. In the Flipkart, pagination is available. In the Google, pagination is available. In the real time, in every project, pagination will be available. What is the pagination now? What is the pagination now? Pagination nothing but retrieving the records based on the page number is called as pagination. In the Zoom also, that pagination will be available. I logged into the Zoom. Online people registered in the Zoom. For our class, let me show you how many people registered for this meeting. Okay, or else any other meeting let me take. Let me go to meetings here, upcoming meeting, and Springboot with Angular workshop is available. Let me click on this. Yesterday, this workshop happened. Springboot with Angular integration workshop happened. How many people registered? 370 people registered. Now I want to see the people who registered for that meeting. If I click on view, now do you think that it is displaying all the people details or it is giving the page numbers? Page numbers. Are you getting my point? So it is displaying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. First 15 records only coming here. If I want to see the remaining people, I should go for 2, I should go for 3, I should go for 4. Like this, pagination is available. Pagination is a very rare requirement or it is very common in every project? Very common in every project. Now you understand? Pagination means retrieving the records based on the page number. Retrieving the records based on the page number is called as pagination. Next one, QBE. QBE means query by example. Now let me go for Flipkart. In the Flipkart, there are 7,000 mobiles available. Now I want to filter the mobiles based on my requirement. I want to go for a mobile which is having minimum 8 GB RAM. That is my requirement. 8 GB RAM. How many mobiles are there? 1,000 mobiles are available. In that, I want to go for a primary camera, 64 megapixel. I want a minimum. Okay, I selected that. How many mobiles are coming? So here, can I say filters are applied? That means the database query is a static query. The database query is a dynamic query. Based on user selection, query will change. Based on the user selection, query will change. That is called search criteria. When you want to implement search criteria in the project, then you will go for query by example. I want to prepare my SQL query dynamically. Already in the JDBC, in the servlets, we have seen dynamic query creation. So to simplify that dynamic query creation, we are going to use a concept called query by example. So here data JPA provided repositories. What are the repositories available? One is a CRUD repository, another one is JPA repository. Which one is having more functionality? JPA repository is having more functionality than CRUD repository. These JPA repository and CRUD repository are classes or interfaces. So these are interfaces. So Spring Data JPA provided repository interfaces to simplify our persistence layer development. Mainly they provided two interfaces. One is called CRUD repository, second one is called JPA repository. Now, if you want to perform database operation, you no need to create a class. If you want to perform database operation, earlier we created DAO classes. From now onwards, you no need to create a DAO class. You need to create one interface by extending any one of these interfaces. Are you guys getting my point? I have a table called book table. In the book table, I want to perform some operations. Now, I will not create book DAO class. I will create book repository. My book repository will extend from either CRUD repository or JPA repository. When you extend from this repository interface, then your interface will get the functionality to perform the CRUD operation, not implementing. I'm saying that not implementing. You need to go for extend. You need to create one interface by extending the properties from JPA repository. If your interface extending the properties from the repository interface, you are done with the persistence layer. You no need to write anything. If your interface is extending the properties from either CRUD repository or JPA repository, then your interface will get the methods to perform CRUD operation. So how many methods I need to write to perform the operations in the 5008 tables? 0. Why? Because we are going to extend the properties from CRUD repository and JPA repository. Are you able to follow me? Yes, tell me. What is Spring Data JPA? Why we are going for Spring Data JPA? Spring Data JPA is one module in the Spring framework. It is used to develop persistence layer. If I don't use Spring Data JPA, then what is the problem? If I don't use Spring Data JPA, what is the problem? We need to write a lot of boilerplate code in the project. What is the meaning of a boilerplate code? Same code again and again we have to write it. How? Data JPA simplifying the persistence layer development by providing two interfaces. What are those two interfaces? One is CRUD repository, another one is JPA repository. What is the difference between CRUD repository and JPA repository? What is CRUD repository and JPA repository? In the CRUD repository, we have CRUD operation methods. In the JPA repository, CRUD operation methods, sorting methods, pagination methods, QBE methods also available. What is the meaning of sorting? Ascending order or descending order. What is the meaning of a pagination? Retrieving the records based on the page number. What is a QBE? Filter. I want to create the query dynamically based on the user input. If a user give only price based records I have to retrieve. If a user give brand name, price plus brand name based records I have to retrieve. To implement dynamic search in the project, we are going to use this QBE. Now, to perform DB operations, we need to create an interface by extending properties from JPA repository interface. If you want to develop a persistence layer, You need to create a interface, guys, not the class. You need to create a interface. Your interface will extend the properties from JPA repository. What are the repositories available? One is the CRUD repository, another one is the JPA repository. Are you clear with my point? Next one, developing first data JPA application. If I develop first application, all your questions will be clarified. Got it? You may get a doubt. Sir, we are creating an interface. We are extending from interface. Then where is the code? Where is that code? So that is the magic, right? We will understand that magic once we develop our first application. Right. Develop first data JPA application. First one, create Springboot application with below dependencies. Create Springboot application with below dependencies. I'm going to use data JPA starter. Which one? Data JPA starter. What is the advantage of data JPA starter? Driver will be loaded, connection will be created, automatic session factory will be created, session will be created, transaction will be happening, everything will be taken care by data JPA. We no need to write single method also. We no need to write single method also. Everything will be taken care by data JPA. Data JPA starter, and I am going to take MySQL driver. I want to communicate with the MySQL database. To communicate with the database, a driver is required. So we need to keep driver in the build path. Who will load that driver? Do I need to write the code to load the driver? No. Who will take care of that? JPA is going to take care of that. And I'm going to use project Lombok. What is the purpose of project Lombok? What is the purpose of project Lombok? To generate the setters and getters, right? So to develop first data JPA application, we need to create the boot application with below dependencies, JPA starter, MySQL driver, project Lombok. Then second step, configure data source properties. Configure data source properties in application.properties file. When I create the boot application, by default, start class will be created and application.properties file also will be created. With which database we want to connect? What is the database URL? What is the database username? What is the database password? That information we need to configure in application.properties file. Okay. Then third step, create repository interface. What is that, guys? Create repository interface by extending, sorry, before that, one mistake. Create entity class. What is the step, guys? Create entity class. What is the meaning of entity class? Java class to DB table mapping. We need to create one Java class. That Java class should be mapped to database table. The Java class which is mapped to the database table is called as entity class. So create the project by adding the JPA starter, MySQL driver and Lombok. Then with which database we want to connect, that database properties we need to configure in the application.properties file. And we need to create the entity class. What is entity class? The Java class which is mapped to database table is called as entity class, right? Next one, we need to create repository interface. Create repository interface by extending JPA repository. How many repositories available in the JPA? 2 repositories available. What are those 2 repositories? One is called CRUD repository. Another one is called JPA repository. Are you able to follow me? With this, we are done. With this, we are done. Next one, I want to test it. Really, my database operations are happening or not. Test the application. Test the application by calling repository methods. Repository interface methods. Test the application by calling repository interface methods. So with these 5 steps, we can complete CRUD operations in the database. Am I writing the logic anywhere? Am I writing any class? Am I writing any method? What I am doing now? I'm just going to create one interface, but it is not a normal interface, guys. This is extending the properties from JPA repository. First, I will go with the CRUD repository. Then we will go for JPA repository also. Read the 5 steps. Fast. Make it fast. In the Springboot, every concept that I am explaining, that I am currently using in my project, that everybody will use in the every project in the real time. We are not teaching anything for time pass in the Springboot. You know the importance of the Springboot. Each and every concept is important. We are learning data JPA. 100% in the microservices project, data JPA will be available. So every concept that we are learning, it will be used in the real time. Every project, every Java project is using Spring Boot in the market. So if you are developing a Spring Boot application, definitely data JPA will be available. Every concept for next 2 months or 3 months, every day is important. So it is not for time pass. You need to focus, you need to listen, you need to practice. Otherwise, there is no benefit. So everything is important. You can check in the Amirpet. There are so many faculties available to teach Java, but very few faculties available to teach Spring Boot. Why? If the faculty work in the real time, then only they can teach the Spring Boot. Normal faculties cannot teach the Spring Boot. You can count the faculties on the fingers. How many faculties are there to teach Spring Boot in the whole Amirpet? Maximum 3-4 people are available. In every institute, one faculty is available to teach Spring Boot. For core Java, advanced Java, 20, 30, 40 people are available as trainers to teach core Java, advanced Java. But to teach Spring Boot microservices, only 3 to 4 faculties available in the whole Amirpet. So that is nothing but the people who really work in the project, who really use Spring Boot in the project, only those people can teach. Core Java, advanced Java, they can read from the books and they can teach. Spring Boot is not like that. So Spring Boot, practically you have to develop the projects on that, then only you will understand the concept. Auto configuration. It is not that much easy to understand what is happening in the Spring Boot. So take it seriously and practice it. Spring Boot microservices, 3-4 faculties are available. Java project, 1 or 2. In the Amirpet, is there any institute who is providing Java real-time project? Only 1 or 2 faculties available to teach the project, because unless they have real-time experience, they can't teach these concepts, because these are not that much easy to understand. If you have practical experience, then only we can deliver. So take that seriously and practice on daily basis. As I told you, after the class is completed, you should not go out. You need to stay here till 9 o'clock. Whatever the example I explained in the class, and you need to practice that example. Every example that you are practicing, store it in your GitHub repository. For every project, you need to create one GitHub repository. You need to push your code into the GitHub repository. Tomorrow, when you go for the interview, if they ask you what you have learned in the last 6 months, you can tell them that I worked on the Spring Boot. I developed some projects on the Spring Boot. My projects are available in my GitHub. You can check my GitHub. Practically, you can show in the interview. Some people will ask you, can you show me your GitHub repositories? What are the examples that you have developed? What are the new concepts that you have learned? For freshers as well as for experienced people also, they will ask the GitHub repository. That GitHub repository will show your programming skill. How many projects you have developed? What are the coding standards you are going to follow? In the 22 JRTP, my previous project batch, in that batch, one person told that in the interview, they asked him to open his GitHub repository. What are the practice you have done? What are the new things that you have implemented? What you have learnt in the last 6 months? Where is your project? Where is your practical examples? They asked him to open the GitHub repository. What are the projects he has done in our project course? He shown them in the interview. They got impressed. So you have developed all these things on your own. So like that, whatever the work you are doing, you keep that work in the GitHub repository. Tomorrow in the interview, you can show your GitHub repositories. Are you clear? Data JPA application you are developing, that you keep in the GitHub. Tomorrow it will be useful for you to show in the interview. You are going to develop a project to export the data to Excel sheet. That repository you need to keep in the GitHub. That code you keep in the GitHub repository. In the project, you already understood how to work with the GitHub, how to push the code to GitHub, how to pull that code. So create your repository, keep your work in the GitHub repository. That will be helpful in the future. Are you getting my point? Yes, right. Are you clear with these 5 steps? Yes, good. Now, let me check my database first, MySQL database. I no need to teach you what is MySQL now. I think my database, earlier I used some database, right? ADB. Let me create one database. Show databases. Ashok IT database is available. Let me create one database. Create database SBMS. That is our Springboot database. Database is created and use database. Use SBMS. I'm using this SBMS database. In this database, show tables. Show tables. Any table available or table is not available? Table is not available. Okay. Now go to our IDE and create a project. Just we need to follow these 5 steps. Then our application will be ready. By using that application, we can perform operations with the database table. Okay. File, new, Spring Starter project. I'm going to create the project with a name called 10 Data JPA application 1. Data JPA CRUD repo application. I'm going to use CRUD repository to develop this application. Maven, packaging type as a jar, Java 11. Group ID, let me change this. Base package, I'm going to use in.ashokite. So I'm creating Data JPA CRUD repository application. Click on next. Springboot 2.7 version. Which dependency we need, guys? JPA starter. So when I type JPA, it is giving the option called Spring Data JPA. Along with that, I need to go for MySQL driver. Add the MySQL driver. And I need Lombok. So let me select project Lombok. So total how many dependencies I'm selecting? 3 dependencies. Lombok dependency, Data JPA, MySQL driver. Click on next, click on finish. Yeah, project is getting created. Yeah. First time I have added JPA starter, so it is downloading the dependencies. Go to pom.xml. Can you see boot parent version 2.7, Java 11? Yeah, this is the dependency I have added. That is Springboot starter, Data JPA, MySQL connector, and Lombok. By default, we are getting the test dependency. Fine. So now in this project, I got start class. Do you know what is the start class? What is the start class? That is the entry point for our boot application execution. Now, let me check the resources folder. What is the resources folder contain? application.properties. In this application.properties file, we need to configure data source properties. What is the meaning of data source properties? Which are used to communicate with the database. Now, here fixed keys will be available, guys. Spring dot data source dot username. Spring dot data source dot username. Spring dot data source dot password. Spring dot data source dot username, data source dot password, spring dot data source dot URL. Spring dot data source dot URL will be available. Spring dot data source dot URL and spring dot data source dot driver class will be available. Data source dot driver class name. So database driver class, database URL, database username, and database password we need to configure. Now let me check my credentials. I think I have deleted. Yeah. Somewhere I stored my database details. I think Shekhar's our workspace. Database username is root and password is also root. Username is root and password is also root. This is the URL. And driver class name com.mysql.cj.jdbc.driver. Right, perfect. Database name is SBMS. Perfect. Data source.username is equal to root, password is equal to root, URL and driver class name. And along with this, we can configure spring.jpa.hibernate to DDL auto. What is the meaning of DDL auto? What is the meaning of DDL auto? Spring.jpa.showSQL is equal to true. Now here guys, these are called as data source properties with which database we want to connect. That will be represented by data source properties. DDL auto will represent if the table is not available, then create the table in the database. Then show SQL, whatever the queries are executing by the data JPA or by the Hibernate, print those queries on the console. We are not writing the queries. We are going to call the method. JPA will create the query internally. Which query it is executing, I want to print that query on the console. To print that query on the console, we will use a property called show SQL. Show SQL to print the query, DDL auto to create the table. Right. With this, our first two steps are completed. Project is created and data source properties also configured. What is the next one? Create the entity class. What is entity class? The Java class which is mapped with the database table is called as entity class. Here, no XML guys. In the Hibernate, you mapped Java class by using Hibernate mapping file. But in the Springboot, XML is not required. Everything is annotation based. Now, let me go for one entity class, new class with a name called book. I'm going to keep this as a entity book. I'm going to take now book class, right? So this class, let me write some variables: private integer book ID, private string book price, and private name, book name here. Book name, private double book price. Like this, I'm taking 3 variables. For these 3 variables, I need setters and getters. Yep. By using @data. I'm writing Lombok. Check my Lombok is working or not. Yes, it is working. When I add that annotation at the rate data, here when I add at the rate data, I'm getting getter methods, I'm getting setter methods, zero param constructor and toString. Everything is coming. Everything is coming. I no need to write it. Now this is normal Java class or it is a entity class. As of now, it is a normal Java class. I need to represent this class as a entity class. To represent this class as an entity, I will go for @entity. Guys, entity annotation will be available in the two packages. So one is Hibernate package, another one is JavaX persistence. You need to choose JavaX persistence package, not the Hibernate package. Got it? Now, I'm taking one annotation called @entity. Now here, if you want to use class name as a table name, then you no need to do anything. Suppose I want to map this class to a table in the database. Then you need to write @table name is equal to book underscore table. If your class name and table name are different, then only we need to go for @table. If @table is optional or mandatory? Optional. So if I don't write @table, what JPA will understand? My class name and table names are same. Now, when we are using any ORM framework, table should have a primary key. Table should have a primary key. So here, book ID is the variable which is mapping with the primary key column in the table. I want to represent in the book table, book ID column should be primary key column. Now here, this book class will be mapped with the book table and book ID will be mapped with the book ID column. Book name will be mapped with the book name column. That means Java class is mapping with the database table. That is called object relational mapping. Now this is my Java class. This is my Java class. Can I call this class as an entity class? Yes. Now this class will be representing a table in the database. Book table, book ID will be available, book name will be available, and book price will be available. In that, book ID will be represented as a PK, nothing but primary key. Book ID will be represented as a primary key. This is the name of the table and these are called as the table columns. Right. No, underscore will come by default. Yeah. This is my Java class. This is my Java class and this is my database table. Whenever you write like this, whenever we write like this, data JPA will be mapping, class name will be mapped with the table name, variable names will be mapped with the column names. This is called object relational mapping. Our Java class is mapped with the database table. The Java class which is mapped with the database table is called as entity class. What is entity? What is entity? The Java class which is mapped with the database table is called as entity. Java class which is mapped with the database table is called entity. How to represent Java class as an entity class? @entity. What is the purpose of @ID? Primary key. Book ID is a variable which is mapped with the primary key column in the table. Here, whatever the variable name is available, variable name will be representing the column name. Variable name will be representing the column name. Now, here, if I have book ID, that will be representing book underscore ID in the table. Suppose, if your variable name and column name is different, then you can write one annotation called @column. @column, what is the name of the column? Now, I don't need that. My class name should be considered as a table name. My variable name should be considered as a column name. So only these two annotations are mandatory. One is @entity, another one is @ID. @entity representing that this is a entity class. This class is mapping with the database table. At the rate ID, it is representing, it is a primary key mapped column. This variable is representing primary key column in the database table. Are you clear how to create entity class? Just two annotations I'm using, that's it. One is at the rate entity, another one is at the rate ID. If I remove at the rate ID, then what will happen? It is a normal Java column. It is not mapped to primary key column. I want to map my variable to primary key column. If I remove at the rate entity, it is a normal Java class, not entity class. So if you want to map your class to table, then you need to write at the rate entity. Third step is also completed. Project is created, data source configured, and entity class also created. Now, what is the final step? This is important. So guys, when I am developing the first example, you may get multiple doubts because, sir, how that logic is executing when I am not writing anything? What is happening internally? So many questions will come. First, see the output of the first program. Then I will explain what is happening internally. Okay, don't get surprised without writing any code, how the record is inserting, how the records are retrieved. First, observe the output. Once it is working as expected, then we will do the postmortem, how the JPA doing all the operations internally. Right. Now let me create a repository interface by extending JPA repository interface. In the JPA, there are two interfaces are available. One is called CRUD repository. Another one is called JPA repository. Clear? Let's go here. Let me create one interface. Save this entity class. Now I'm creating another package, new interface package in.ashokit.repo. Now this is a book. Let me create it as a book repository. Book repository. Fine. I'm creating a interface. As of now, it is a normal interface. Now I want to make it as a JPA interface. To make it as a JPA interface, extends from CRUD repository. So there are two interfaces available. One is called CRUD repository. Second one is called JPA repository. Let me go for CRUD repository. It is expecting two generic arguments. It is expecting two generic arguments. What are those two things is, first one, it is representing, the first argument will represent, this repository should represent which entity class, right? So when I use the repository to perform insert operation should happen in which table? Book table. How repository will know that this repository should perform operations in the book table? That's where we will configure book entity class here. We are going to configure book entity class here, import it. Okay guys, so my repository is extending the properties from CRUD repository. For this repository, I am telling, hey repository, hey book repository, you need to understand the table structure based on this entity. When I use book repository dot save, it has to save the record in the book table. For every database table, earlier we will create one DAO class. Now for every database table, one entity class will be available, one repository will be available. If you have 500 tables, 500 entities, 500 repositories. What about methods? Not required. You no need to write the method. You just need to create one interface by extending the properties from JPA interface. So your repository interface should represent which entity it has to use, with which table it has to communicate. My project will have 500 tables. So that 500 repositories I'm going to create. Concentrate. What are you doing? Concentrate. Right. So here I'm having 500 database tables. When I have the 500 database tables, 500 repositories I'm going to create. So every repository will represent one entity. What is entity? Entity will know what is the table structure. Repository should understand the table data based on the entity. So the relation will be there between the repository and entity class. Are you clear? Now, second argument is what is the data type of your primary key column? What is the data type of our primary key column? Primary key column is mapped to book ID variable. What is the data type of the variable? Integer. So that ID represent primary key column data type we have to represent. What is the primary key column data type? Integer. So I need to specify integer. Are you guys clear? Now I'm creating one interface. My interface extending the properties from CRUD repository. CRUD repository is our interface, or CRUD repository is a JPA interface. CRUD repository is a JPA interface. For the CRUD repository, I am giving book. What is a book now? Entity. For book repository, I am giving book entity. What is a book entity? Book entity is mapped to book table. Okay. Now, with this, our project is completed. Our persistence layer development is completed. By using this book repository, you can perform CRUD operations in the table. Sir, where are the methods? Do I need to write the methods? Do I need to write the method? No. The methods are already available in the CRUD repository. CRUD repository is a class, or CRUD repository is an interface. CRUD repository is also a interface. Let's go to CRUD repository. So what is this? Public interface CRUD repository extending from there is another interface called repository interface. Now see here, what is the method? Save method. What is this method? Save all. What is this? Find by ID, exist by ID, find all by ID, count method, delete by ID, delete all by ID, delete all. There are 11 to 12 methods available in the CRUD repository. Now, whatever the methods are available in the CRUD repository, our repository can access, or our repository cannot access? Can access. How come? My repository is extending the properties from the CRUD repository. Inheritance. There is a parent-child relationship available. Child class can access the parent class properties. Child interface can access parent interface properties. Now, my book repository is the child interface for the CRUD repository. So whatever the methods are available in the CRUD repository, my book repository can extend. Whatever the methods available in the CRUD repository, my book repository can extend. Are you clear? Fine. As of now, what I have done, guys? I created a project. I configured a data source properties. I created entity class. I created repository interface. That's it. Now go to start class. Go to our start class. First of all, is there any logic available in the start class regarding persistence layer? Nothing is available. First, let me run the application. Just let me run the application and let me see, is it providing auto configuration or not? What is the meaning of auto configuration? Identify what configuration is required for my project and perform that configuration. I added JPA starter. What is the purpose of JPA? Database operation. To communicate with the database, connection is required. Connection is required. Now let me see here my boot application creating the connection with the database or not. I am not writing any logic. I just created a interface. That's it. And I created one entity class. Let me run this application. Run as boot application. Check the console. Beauty. What is this? Table is created. Am I creating the table or Springboot is creating the table? What is this? Internally it is using what? Hibernate. Table is created. Not only table. What is this? Hikari. What is Hikari? We discussed in the advanced Java classes. What is the connection pool? Am I creating that connection pool? In the JDBC classes, 1 or 2 days we spent to understand what is connection pool, how to create the connection pool. But do we need to do that manually now? Can I call it is the auto configuration? Did I write the code to create the connection pool? Did I ask Springboot to create the connection pool? that is intelligent. Boot is intelligent. Based on the starter available in the pom.xml, it scanned my starters. JPA starter available. It thought that this programmer want to develop the persistence layer. To develop the persistence layer, database connections are required. Getting the database connection every time is not recommended. Connection pool is recommended. It created that connection pool. How beautiful it is. Is it reducing the programmer's effort or not? Can we do more work in the less time with the Spring Boot? Yes. Now see here, it has done one more operation here. Bootstrapping data JPA repositories in the default mode. Now finished, it is seeing here, finished Spring data repository scanning in the 35 millisecond, found one JPA repository interface. Now if you observe, am I writing @repository annotation? Am I writing @repository annotation? What is the purpose of @repository? To represent our Java class as a Spring Bean. For data JPA repositories, that annotation is optional. Why? Because this interface is not a normal interface. This interface is a special interface. What is the speciality? Extending the properties from the CRUD repository. Here guys, bootstrapping is happening. Whenever our project is started, data JPA having some special classes, those classes are scanning our project and they identified which interfaces are extending the properties from the JPA interface. There is one interface called book repository that is extending the properties from the JPA repository. Whenever that interface extending the properties from the JPA interface, data JPA will give VIP treatment for our interface. Special treatment will be given to our interface. Sir, what is that special treatment? Special treatment is in the runtime, implementation class will be created for our interface. Generally, in the Java, when there is an interface, abstract methods will be available. So now, as a programmer, we need to implement that interface. We need to override the methods of that interface. But in the data JPA, you create the interface. Implementation will be provided by data JPA in the runtime. Are you guys getting my point? Should I write the logic for the methods now? No. My interface extending the properties from CRUD repository. In the CRUD repository, already methods are available. Whatever the methods are available in the CRUD repository, I can access them from my interface. Now tell me once again, book repository is a class or book repository is an interface? Book repository is an interface. Now I will show you the magic. What is the return type of the run method? What is the return type of the run method, guys? Configurable application context. Configurable application context. What is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of this? It is returning the reference of the IOC container. Configurable application context. Yes. Configurable application context is the return type of our run method. Now I'm going to call one method called getBean method. What is the purpose of getBean? What is the purpose of getBean? It is going to give the bean object. What is the bean? What is the bean, guys? The class which is managing by IOC container is called as bean. I am creating the objects for the bean, or IOC will create objects for the bean. IOC will create the objects for the bean. Am I starting the IOC or run method starting the IOC? Run method starting the IOC. Now I will write a method context dot get bean of book repository dot class. Right. Now here we are going to use book repository as a repo. What is the meaning of context bean? What is the meaning of context.getBean. What is the meaning of context.getBean? Get the object of the bean from the IOC container. Book repository is a class or book repository is a interface. Now here, whenever you call context.getBean of book repository, IOC container will return implementation class of that interface. Are you able to follow me? Whenever I call context.getBean of book repository, then IOC container will create the book repository object. Can IOC create the object for the book repository? IOC cannot create the object for the book repository. Why? Because it is a interface. Then what it will provide? Interface implementation class. Now, did I create implementation class for that? Do I have implementation class for that? Then how I will get the implementation class? How I will get the implementation class? In the runtime, JPA will provide the implementation, right? Can I see that class which belongs to that interface implementation? How can I check that? Get class dot get name, system dot out dot println, repo dot get class dot get name. So repo is an interface variable. Interface variable can hold implementation class object. List L is equal to new array list. What is the meaning of that? L is a interface variable holding array list class object. Now similarly, here I am taking book repository repo is equal to context.getBean of book repository. I'm asking IOC container to give the book repository object. I'm asking IOC container to give the book repository object, but actually book repository is a interface. For that interface, I'm not writing the implementation because my interface already extending from the CRUD repository. CRUD repository is a JPA interface. When your interface extending the properties from the JPA interface, JPA will provide the implementation for our interface in the runtime. Because of that reason only, whenever we run our application, we have seen they have done the bootstrapping. They are identifying how many JPA interfaces available in the project. In my project, how many JPA interfaces available? How many JPA interfaces available? Only one JPA interface is available. Finished scanning the JPA repositories and found one JPA interface. What is this? Internally it is using data JPA or not? Now, what is this? Hibernate. What is this? Hibernate. Connection pool, and it created the database table. When my application is getting terminated, Hikari pool also stopped. Connection pool is started, connection pool is closed. How it understood with which database it has to connect? No. Properties, right? With which database it has to connect? I have given the database properties. These are called data source properties. Now, let me run this. What is the output we will get from here? Implementation class name. Programmer providing the implementation or JPA providing the implementation? Programmer providing the implementation or JPA providing the implementation? JPA providing the implementation. Right click, run as boot application. That is the implementation class for our interface. Who created that implementation? JPA created. That means in the runtime for our JPA interface, a proxy class is created. So proxy design pattern they are using internally to provide the implementation for our class in the runtime. Sir, can we see that proxy class? No. We can't see that because that class is created in the runtime. So now we are going to perform operations with our table. Okay. Yes, I have a book class. Book B is equal to new book. B dot set book ID as 101. B dot set book name, that is Spring. And next one, B dot set book price. I'm giving some value, some 1000. Okay. Perfect. So what I have done here, I'm setting the data to my entity object. Now let me go for repository.save of my book. System.out.println record inserted. Record inserted. So what I am doing here, I'm calling repository.save. Which repository save method? Book repository save method. In the book repository, do I have any method? What is the meaning of that? What is the meaning of that? It is accessing the parent interface, right? So indirectly we are calling the CRUD repository method by using our repository. So is there any logic to insert the record? What I am doing here, I am getting the IOC reference. From the IOC, I am getting the book repository bean object. Book repository is an interface. How can we get the object for the interface? We are not getting the interface object. We are getting the interface implementation class object. Who provided implementation for that interface? JPA provided. Compile time or runtime? Runtime. That implementation class is called as proxy class. That is called proxy class. Now I want to insert a record in the table. To insert a record in the table, I'm creating entity object. I'm setting the data to entity. I'm passing the entity to the save method. Go to database. Sorry guys. Show tables. Show tables. Okay, there is a table with a name called book table. Now let's go for select star from book. Select star from book. Check this table. Any record available or table is empty? Table is empty. Now go here. Run this program. Run as boot application. Record is inserted. Query is also printed. Go to the database. Record is inserted into the table or not? How many lines of code I am writing in my repository? How many lines of code I am writing in my repository? 0 lines of code I am writing. Then how record is inserted? Where is that? Load the driver, get the connection, create the statement, execute the query, close the connection. Is it required? Not required. Who is executing all that logic? All that logic is executing by our data JPA. Now I want to retrieve the record. Now record insertion completed, right? Now I want to retrieve that record. Comment that code. Okay. Now in order to retrieve the record, repo.find by ID. ID is 101. Repository.find by ID. Now this is going to give me optional object. It is going to provide me optional object. Find by ID. Now I need to write system.out.println find by ID dot get. So whenever you call find by ID, it is giving optional object to avoid null pointer exceptions. Now once you get the optional object dot get, then actual record will be given to you. Right click, run as boot application. See the console. Am I able to retrieve the record from the table? Yes. Am I writing any logic for that? So if you want to save the record, we need to call save method. If you want to retrieve the record, then you need to call get method. Find by ID method you need to call. When you call find by ID, it will give you optional object. From the optional object, you are going to call the get method. Are you able to follow me? Yes. Is it easy or difficult to develop persistence layer? Am I writing any code? No, we are not writing any code. So let me give you, this is my entity class, guys. Book is my entity class. And this is my repository interface. And these are the data source properties I am configuring. You configure your database credentials, your database name. And this is my test class. This test class I am using to insert the record as well as to retrieve the record. Tomorrow, we are going to understand how to perform CRUD operations. What are the other methods available in the CRUD repository. What is the purpose of those methods also? We will understand in the tomorrow's class. Can you guys practice this? You understand what is the data JPA and how to develop first application by using data JPA? Yes. Anybody having any questions? Yeah. Right. Any questions? Yeah. No. This class doesn't mean that it is a class. It is just a data type. So whenever you give that class, that means it will represent class type. Class type. So you can't write interface like this. Right? It is invalid. So any Java class or interface, it will be represented with the dot class. Right? Yeah. Fine. Anyone else? Any questions, guys? So what is the data JPA? It is one module in Spring Framework. It is used to develop persistence layer. What are the ways available to develop persistence layer? 5 ways are available. In that, what is the problem if I go for other approaches? Boilerplate code. In every table, some common methods we have to write. So if you have 5,000 tables, 20,000 methods we have to write. But if you go for data JPA, it is avoiding boilerplate code. How we are avoiding boilerplate code? By using data JPA repositories. What are the JPA repositories available? CRUD repository available, JPA repository available. What is the difference between the CRUD repository and the JPA repository? CRUD repository will perform only methods to perform CRUD operation. JPA repository providing the methods to perform CRUD operations plus sorting plus pagination plus query by example. How to develop the first JPA application? We have done that. What is the method we are using to insert the record? Save method. What is the method we are using to retrieve the record? Find by ID method. So now, are we writing the logic or we are using JPA to perform the DB operation? JPA. So how to make our repository as a JPA repository? By extending the properties from CRUD repository. What is happening when you extend the properties from CRUD repository? Yes, it is creating the implementation class in the runtime. That class name is called as proxy class. We are creating implementation in the runtime. That class is called as a proxy class. Are you clear? Any questions, anyone? Anybody having any questions? We'll discuss how to work with composite primary key. @embeddable, @embedded ID. Already done na? Same concept. Same here also. @embeddable, @embedded ID annotations. Relationships. Already Sari is explaining. One-to-one, one-to-many. Same concept will be available here also. Relationships you are learning with annotation or with XML? Annotation. Then I think I no need to discuss again. Because same annotations, same entities. There you are writing the DAO. Here repository will be available. Or else I will tell to Shekhar sir also to use the data JPA for the remaining relationships. Because same concept only. Now you understand what is data JPA. So Shekhar sir also will explain the Hibernate concept with the data JPA. Good. Online students. Sir, difference between implementation extents are. Sun Prakash, kya question hai bhai? Implementation extents. You need to learn core Java first, buddy. Yeah. Jansi Chaudhary. Is there any API to see all the methods available in the CRUD repository? Yes. You just press Control and click on that interface. It will show you what all the methods available in the CRUD repository. Tomorrow I will explain all the methods in the CRUD repository and what is the purpose of each method also. When to go for which method, that we will discuss in the tomorrow's class. Yep. Okay, good. Any other question? Why Vinod Kumar asking a question? Why we are creating wrapper class data field instead of primitive data type in the entity class? Very good question. I will tell you the reason for that. It is not recommended to use primitive data types in the entity class. Always go for wrapper classes. Why? That reason I will show you practically. Right. Yeah, sometimes we can use serializable also in the ID Shubham. We can do that. Spring JDBC versus JDBC, which is faster? JDBC will be fast. No, Spring JDBC also plain SQL query only we will execute. Luxury wise, Spring JDBC. Right. Yeah, fine. Good guys. Fine. I want everybody to develop this first application of Spring Data JPA before coming to tomorrow's session. Thank you. Now go to the lab, practice that application today itself. You have to stay till 9 o'clock. Yes, good guys. Thank you.